And man, it's that time of year again, the snowfall coming here in Manitoba for the very first time here this year in 2021. And to join me to talk about it, how it's going to have an effect on agriculture here in Manitoba, as well as some other things, is Harry Siemens here joining the Farm Report. The Farm Report brought to you by Wolf Enterprises. And there he is, the man himself. Just wait for that to finish. Yep, Harry Siemens joined the show here on this Wednesday morning, here on November 10th. Harry, it's great to see you. You're looking very good today. It's nice to have you on once again for this week's edition of Rise and Shine Manitoba show. How are you doing on this Wednesday morning, man?
Well, you know what? First of all, thank you, thank you, thank you. It said Wednesday. That was good. Wednesday, rise and shine. Hey, and you gave me a come on. You said I'm looking good. Hey, look at this young fella.
Yeah.
This guy's got a haircut. He's looking great. Wow. It's good. You know what? I feel you just told me your age, and I won't share that with the audience, but at the same time, there's a few years difference between us, but I can remember way back. I wasn't that young. I was 25 when I started in radio. I can remember my first time that red light went on at the radio station in Altona at 11:05, and I was reading sports for the first time, and it was a 4.5 minute news sportscast. And by the second minute, I couldn't breathe. Because I hadn't taken a breath yet. They gave me that as a going away present, the audio tape of that. Tape at that time, it was tape. And anyway, so great. It's great. You know what? I talked to people this morning, and there's those people that say, "Hey, I don't want that snow," and then there's those people saying, "Bring it on." I'm the one that says, "Bring it on," for the simple reason, as one fella just told me earlier this week. The Red River is so dry. He took a video of it, and he sent me the video where he can walk across anywhere at the Red River in near St. Jean, Manitoba. That's how low it is. Anywhere, just taking a few steps. Sure, there's trickle of streams going through, but it's low. And and so that's the snow. Yeah, as everybody knows, 10 inches of snow is 1 inch of water. But we love that snow in wintertime. It covers the crops, it covers the fields, it keeps the fields and from blowing dirt when it gets windy. And so the snow is so welcome because we need to have runoff in spring so that we can fill up the streams. And once the streams fill up, then it starts to run into dugouts, and then it starts to fill up the rivers and so forth. So that's why snow is so vital now, especially because we talked to one cattle producer, and he says right now at his place north of Winnipeg, he says if we don't get really lots of moisture and rain, he says he could basically write off next year's crop. That's how dry it is right now. And so the snow, you know what? If we get it in the form of rain, so much the better in fall because it can soak in, it freezes up the dirt and so forth. But let it come in whatever form it may. We need it, and we need it bad.
Yeah, no doubt about it, and gonna be beneficial if we do end up getting a lot of snow just for farmers, getting that moisture in there. I gotta ask you this, Harry, when's the last time we've seen the Red River this dry as it's been this year?
You know what? I don't know. The other thing that and his name is Gilbert Sabarin, and we'll talk about him right now. I interviewed Gilbert yesterday morning. He farms right there at St. Jean. His father farmed. His grandfather settled the place years ago, and he doesn't remember. And he's not as old as I am, but his father is. They don't remember when it was as dry as it is or as low as it is right now. People say, well, yeah, that's that's the red, because once it gets to Winnipeg, of course, it gets narrower and there's more, looks like there's more water in the river, right? So
Yeah.
people say, well, who cares? We got water. Well, no, it's got to come. And not only that, the catchment area, meaning where does the Red River start and catch the water? It's about 50 miles, 100 kilometers south of Fargo, North Dakota. That's where the catchment area comes, and so it has to come from that area. So any moisture those areas receive, it all has to come, because we remember, you don't, but I do, flood of 97, which was the flood of the century. I covered it at that time. I was doing television, and so I flew in an airplane. I was in the boat, and I think I've shared this before. The Red River, flying south of Pembina, North Dakota, with a single engine plane, and bless his soul, it was the late Ben Weeb, who did flying lessons and spray plane at Morden, Manitoba. So we flew from Pembina, we flew from Morden, but we flew south. And all of a sudden he smiles and looks at me, and he smiles at me, and he says, Harry, I says, we're flying illegally. I says, why? He says, a single engine plane can only be 1 mile from shore. And we were flying in the middle of the Red River. The Red River was 14 miles wide. And so, and now we have a trickle. So that shows what, and what Gilbert told me is that, he has land along the Red River. So it almost always floods. And so they spend hours, days collecting flood debris. This year was the first time in history where he's been farming he could remember they didn't have to collect any flood debris, because the Red River stayed within its banks and didn't come over at all. So there's some things there. I mean, he knows how to farm that land. Gilbert told me about his crop this year. He said he had a better crop this year in this year's drought than he had in 2018, 2019, and 2020. There was about a 10 square kilometer area those 3 years that was in a drought. And he always had kind of 50-60% of the crop. This year he had a full crop. But that brings me to the next story, and that's the one about the update on the forward contracting, because Gilbert is the one I called about that. I had talked to Gilbert earlier in January, March maybe, and he talked about how he had forward sold crops. Now I followed up with him. I says, how did this work for you? Well, he says, I was able to sell as quickly as I could, to buy out, not sell, but to buy the contract. And he says, even then, it cost him $1 a bushel for his contract. But he said, had he waited until harvest, it would have cost him $6 a bushel. So, and the other thing was he forward sold too soon. And so he's hauling, the day I called him on the Saturday, he's hauling 13 semi-loads of canola to the Bungie crushing plant in Altona, Manitoba. And he says, and that particular, he priced it all over the place. But he said, some of that right now, the canola price is around $20. He had priced some canola at 12. So he has to deliver that canola, and he sells, and he has to get his $12 that he thought then was a real good deal, right? Now he sees the price at 20, and he says, but I tell him, I always tell people that, you've never made that money. It's not like money you've actually lost. You never had it. And so you can't lose something that you don't have. But at the same time, I'm a realist, and I know how Gilbert was upset and hurting, that he had done, because he said his 13 loads, and I forget what the exact bushel, doesn't matter. He had averaged on the low side of the 12 as far as getting paid for it. So, and anyway, but he had enough canola to fulfill his contract, so he wasn't hurting there.
Wow, that's just crazy. The prices, it was like at 12 and then at 20, just nuts. The way this year is going.
That's right.
Farmers here, and across Canada, just the drought that we've seen this year, especially in Manitoba. But Harry, talking about something else here, the cattle farmer follow-up. We've talked about cattle farmers many times here on the show. I know that you said this is something that you wanted to talk about. Just talk about, more in depth into what you meant by, the cattle farmer follow-up, what we're following up on this week.
Ian Smith Ian Smith farms north of Winnipeg. I had a chance to visit with him this morning at 8 o'clock. I did an interview with Ian, a follow up to interviews I've done throughout the year, because he's sitting in that drought area. And he's a small farmer. He's just a quarter section farmer, but that doesn't matter. To me, a farmer is a farmer, whether he's got quarter section or 100 quarter sections. They just do things a little bit different. But Ian is smart when it comes to what he does. He inherited that quarter section from his mom and dad. He's a single fella. I think he's 58 years old, and so he was raising pigs and cattle, and because of the drought and the high cost of feed, he's moving down on his pigs. He's liquidated some of the pigs, and he's done a better job with cattle, because the input costs for cattle are much less than the input costs for pigs. But at the same time, and I'd like to do a shout out for Ian Smith, because he sells privately his pork, and he gets it butchered at BJ Packers, and then he does home delivery once you've ordered. You can order and whatever amount, you can determine what cuts you want it, and then he delivers it. So for him, in order to sell pigs on the market, on the world price, if he would be shipping to Maple Leaf, or he ships it privately like he does, he gets about $100 more per pig by going the extra work. But you may say, well, why is it so expensive? Well, it's not really expensive. The quality is top notch. You know exactly what you get when you buy this pork from Ian Smith. And so, so he tells me that he's okay for feed till about next April for his pigs, because he's cut back on pigs, and he's got enough feed as far as his cattle are concerned. And so I just wanted to say that there's a lot of cattle producers in the Interlake that are still struggling. We continue to see sales at the Ashern and some of the other auction marts where they're selling off partial herds and so forth, because some of these people just don't know how they're going to get it. It's not a matter of so much, as we've talked about getting the feed. It's a matter of getting it at a price that makes it worthwhile for you to feed your animal, and then to sell. If you're just putting it through the animal for the sake of putting it through and you're not making any money, then the animals right now have a pretty good price. They just liquidate them and sell them off. The sad part there, some of those guys may never be back in the cattle business.
Yeah, that's unfortunate to see, but just the way it goes sometimes, right? Just the way business is handled. Yeah, talking about one last thing, then we'll get into your farming tip of the week here on Seaman Says. But before that, the new chair of the Manitoba Pork Council, update us on who he is, who he is.
Rick Prege. Rick is a hog producer from Notre Dame. And the group of farmers started back in 1994 to help the economy, to create jobs. So they started. So today they have 5,000 sows. They market 120,000 pigs a year to High Life. They have created since 1994 40-some jobs for Notre Dame. And that's a lot of jobs.
Yeah.
So Rick is now the new chairman of Manitoba Pork Council, and he wants to see, and it's going to be a tough sell, but I'm right there with him. He wants to be able to see other communities. They want to sell the positiveness of hog production in other communities, so other communities can enjoy the kind of economy that Notre Dame has enjoyed. Just a small community, but he says he had counted. He had forgotten how many houses their workers own in Notre Dame, and they're from the Philippines. They're Latinos, he said, and they're from Mexico, and they all work together on this big pig farm. So Rick is the new chair of Manitoba Pork. I shout out to him. I appreciate him. I got to know Rick, and we had this hog producer Zoom meeting, And at the end, and it was his first time of chairing the meeting. So I had a chance to say something at the end. And I said, you know what? If Rick is as competitive running Manitoba Pork Council as its chairman as he was on the ball field when I was umpiring, I says the hog industry is in great shape because I was an umpire when Rick was pitching back in 2004, 2005.
Yeah.
His 18-year-old son was the catcher. And today,
Wow.
his 18-year-old son isn't 18 anymore. He's now managing that big pig operation so that Rick has the time and the effort to put into Manitoba Pork Council. That's my shout out to Rick Prige this morning.
And crazy how it comes full circle. How at one point his son is pitching in baseball, and then now he took over Rick's old job, and then Rick
Totally.
moving up into the ranks. It's awesome to hear. Awesome how those things work out in life. Hey, Harry. But talking about your farming tip of the week here, the last thing on the agenda today on the Farm Report. What is Harry Siemens' farming tip of the week here on Seaman Says here on Rise and Shine, Manitoba?
Well, you know what? As I've said it before, uh, it's the time of year. It's time to sit back and let the nature take place. It's snowing. It's raining. It's November. I took my bicycle out for the last ride yesterday, and I'm getting it tuned up. I think that's exactly what farmers are going to be doing and should be doing. But my tip is, guys, get back, sit back, and relax. It's been just a really nail biter, hair curler kind of year this year. Sit back, enjoy the moisture, and relax, and just take a time off with your family. Of course, Remembrance Day, you've got the poppy. I didn't have mine on now. Your Remembrance Day on November the 11th. You know what? It's awesome. We should never forget the freedoms
Yeah.
that we have today for those people that gave their lives for us way back when. And that's something we need to never, never forget.
Yeah, you're 100% right there, Harry. Never take what we have now for granted ever, because I got to look back on those people that have given their sacrifice to give us this freedom, as well as the people that are still giving the sacrifice today to keep us, where we're at here in Canada. In my opinion, the greatest country in the world. Harry Siemens here on the Farm Report, of course, a man of many wise words. Great tip as always, Harry, on your farming tip of the week on Siemens Says. We'll see you next Wednesday, but until then, you stay safe, enjoy, and like you told farmers out there, you sit back and relax. Hey, we'll speak again next week.
You bet.
Harry Siemens, the man on the Farm Report here on ASTV Productions on Manitoba Show, Rise and Shine Manitoba, of course, brought to you by the sponsor right here, Wolf Enterprises.